Chapter 39. Personal Army. Sincroft, the third level.
Attention, citizens. It has been reported that Krynan Jameso is in Sincroft. Anybody in Sincroft capable of fighting, we need you to apprehend this criminal. Do everything you can to capture him. His bounty has been raised to 10,000 shards. May Durana be with you.
Explosions and gunfire erupted in the distance as Krynan and Karsten arrived at the bell tower. The obelisk was made of the same boring gray stone that made up every other building in Sincroft, and Krynan looked up at the rusted old bell that hung under a canopy at the top. He saw the Black Knights gathered behind it and hurried forward.
"Jameso!"
The voice of Commander Emilio called out as Krynan approached.
"Krynan Jameso, I am both saddened and delighted to see you. It pains me that you didn't make it past Dread's Keep, but I am filled with joy that you are well."
"Yeah, cool," Krynan quickly said, shaking his head at the commander.
"Look, we have to go, now. The portal out of here is open in the marketplace and is guarded by Govian Inquisitors. If we get through there, we can get back to Dread's Keep, and then I can progress to the next level."
Emilio looked at Krynan and smirked. He didn't need further convincing. He raised his hand and turned around to address the small army behind him.
"Time to fight, brothers!"
Emilio shouted to them all.
"Jameso has returned to us. It is our job to get him where he needs to be. Come, let's follow him to the battle."
Emilio turned back to Krynan and nodded.
"Wherever you need us to go, we will, my friend. We must get you to the final level."
Emilio reached his arm out, and Krynan grasped it.
"Thank you, Commander."
Krynan nodded to the Lycani, who had been his commander throughout his childhood. In that moment, he felt a strange sense of equality with him, one that wasn't addressed or instigated by the commander, but more so one that Krynan felt he had, in some way, earned.
"Move out!"
Emilio shouted as he let go of Krynan's arm and turned to the army.
"Time to show these Govians how scary dead Black Knights are!"
The Black Knight army was small. It was composed of about 50 soldiers with weapons they had scavenged from the players they had ambushed on their way to Sincroft. There were only a few guns between all of them. The rest were equipped with swords, bows, axes, spears, whatever they could get their hands on. They all ran as one, with Karsten leading them.
"We're almost there,"
Karsten said as he came to a stop and turned to Krynan.
"Just up the road a bit, then we take a right at the next road. That'll take us directly into the marketplace."
"Good," Krynan said. He turned to Emilio and the other commanders.
"All right, we're going to have to surprise them and force our way through. We will probably take heavy losses here. Are you sure you're up to it?"
"What is there for us to lose, Krynan?"
Emilio asked.
"We will respawn, we will regroup, and we will fight again. We intend to keep the fight going here in the hills. We are the Seraphim. We will always fight."
Krynan nodded and looked past Emilio at the rest. He saw his friend Alia's mother smiling warmly at him. He saw Zywayne and Zybel Phoenix standing side by side. Zywayne had his head held high and gave Krynan the slightest of nods. He saw Vasily Immel, Malinka's grandfather. The large elf gave Krynan a supportive wink. Finally, he looked at Jeff Skaven, his former squad mate. He wouldn't be so bold as to call him a friend. But, yeah, Krynan knew him. The rest stood there, weapons in hand and hearts aligned with Krynan's. Once again, they were about to give everything they had in support of pushing him forward. For a moment, Krynan felt a strong sense of gratitude. He was lucky to have people who would stand there and rally to support him, even in death. He thought about what Black Knight had stood for and what had bound them all together back in life, and then he looked up at the generations of soldiers who stood before him. In spite of the politics, the squabbling, and all the internal fighting, Black Knight was family. Krynan looked upon all of them. He felt a strange compulsion to reach out and thank every single one of them. He wanted to sit with them all and hear their stories and drink with them. He wanted to spar with them and rush into battle alongside them. 100,000 words passed his mind, countless ways he could express how he felt, support them, and encourage them before they went into battle with and for him. But only 2 words managed to come out in that moment.
"Thank you," Krynen said softly. The emotion was bubbling inside him and threatening to come out if he said any more words. He bit the corner of his lip and nodded his head rapidly as he quickly turned his back to them all. He wasn't going to let himself cry. Not there. He nervously tapped on the hilt of his sword before his fingers ran down and wrapped around the handle. He pulled it free from its scabbard, and then the pistol that Karsten had gifted him found its way into his hands, and suddenly words weighed down his tongue and his heart, and he had to release them. "Whatever happens," Krynen called back to the soldiers behind him, "I will never forget you all. None of you." He looked over at Karsten, and the old elf gave him a solemn nod. This is all just the beginning." Krynen's words turned into a shout, and he turned around to face his brethren. "None of our lives are over. No, we were just waiting for this moment. For every moment that follows, we fought for something that mattered back in life, that carried over to our deaths. All we truly ever wanted was to live our lives in peace. That fight won't end until we can do that, and I promise you I will do everything I can to make sure that happens. So again I say, brothers, thank you. Now, let's go kill them all." In spite of Krynen's impromptu speech, and in spite of the encouragement that the speech swelled their hearts with, the Black Knights were no match for the guns that the Govian soldiers had. Krynen charged forward, flanked on either side by his brethren, and he watched as they all began to fall to the bullets raining down on them.
"Shields up!"
Vasily Immel shouted.
"Protect Jameso!" "We'll get you there, Krynen,"
Jeff shouted as he sprinted alongside Krynen.
"Don't you fucking worry. You'll get there."
A bullet passed through Jeff's eye, and he dropped to the ground, dead. Krynen snarled at the sight, but couldn't focus on it. He had to keep pushing.
"Just up ahead,"
Karsten shouted.
"The portal, 50 feet. Push!"
Krynen heard the sound of shields bashing the Inquisitors as the shield-bearers in the front pushed forward. They trampled over a few, and Krynen made sure to stomp hard on their throats as he passed. Black Knights were getting shot up all around him. Their blood was spraying his body, but they stayed true to their word. They protected their brother with their lives. They swung their swords, fired bows, and fought with everything they had to get him that 50 feet.
"Stay on your feet!"
Krynen heard Vasily Immel scream at everyone.
"That is fucking order! Do not fall!"
"Keep pushing!" Commander Emilia roared. "We are almost there!" Krynen felt something pass through his arm, and he yelped in pain and spun straight into the arms of Zywayne Phoenix. Zywayne held him up, pushed him forward, and screamed for Krynen to find his footing. Krynen finally did and ran. The ranks were thin. There weren't many Black Knights left, and Krynen could hear bullets whizzing all around him. The portal was in sight. It was right there. He was almost there. The gunfire around him, the screaming, the fighting, it drowned out his thoughts. Krynen could only focus on what he saw, and he saw blue.
"Break off!"
Vasily shouted.
"Engage enemy! Run, Krynen!"
Krynen took off in a full sprint with Karsten at his side. He heard the screams of the Black Knights and the Govians alike as they fell. He listened to bullets whizzing past his head, but he focused on the blue light ahead of him.
"We did it!"
Emilio shouted before he fell to a knee.
"You are there, Krynen! You are there, brother! Go, run, fight, and save us all!"
"We believe in you!"
Aura's soul shouted as she fell to her back.
"Be fierce!"
Zywayne Phoenix screamed as his throat was cut. The last thing Krynen heard before he and Karsten dove through the portal was the sound of laughter. The few Black Knights who had not fallen were cheering and laughing as they died to protect Krynen once again. Krynen felt only rage and adrenaline as he passed through the blue light. All his life, every breath he had taken, he had hated the idea of caring for others. He had actively lived to avoid everyone. He expended all his effort only to find in death that so many would all be willing to fight for him.
Krynen's vision went dark as he passed through the portal. His tears fell from his eyes, and he realized what it was truly like to care for and to be cared for by others. Krynen and Karsten emerged from the other side of the portal, and Krynen fell to his knees. He dug his hands into the dirt beneath him, lowered his head, and all he could do was cry. The outpouring of support was too much for him to handle. They had helped him, knowing that they may not be able to escape. His Black Knight brothers had all but pushed him through the portal so that he could have an opportunity to live again. This did not make sense to Krynen. Why would anyone be so willing to endure such pain just so one person could have a chance? Why him? Krynen threw the dirt in his hands to his sides in a fit, and Karsten knelt down next to him.
Look, partner,
Karsten said softly yet sternly.
We can't sit here and wait for those Govians to come through the portal. All them folk who just died did so that you can keep moving forward. Now ain't the time for resting or crying. Now's the time to find that strength inside of you and keep your feet moving.
Krynen nodded at Karsten's words. He looked over at the elf and sighed.
I'm ready for this shit to be over,
Krynen whispered.
You're preaching to the choir there, boy.
Karsten chuckled. The elf took hold of Krynen's arm and lifted him off the ground.
I've been ready for this shit to end ever since it started. Lost my mind a few times, found it again, then lost it again. If what you're doing can change all this for the better, if you can, I don't know, get us out of here, or give us a fighting chance even, then I'd say it was all worth it. Hells, boy, I've been here I don't know how many lifetimes, and I ain't never seen nothing like this. Now, come on, get your ass up off the ground, quit your blubbering, and let's put some distance between us and this portal.
Krynen looked over at Karsten and nodded in confirmation that he had heard the elf's words. He took a deep breath in through his nose, clenched his fists together, and looked at Dread's Keep ahead of them.
All right,
Krynen said as he wiped the last tear from his eyes.
Let's fucking go.
That's what I like to hear,
Karsten said and slapped Krynen on the back. At that, the two stepped forward and started running toward the castle.